Alright, hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. My name is Eric, and this is the other CEDH, where the C stands for casual. We are your all things casual kitchen table magic. Thank you for joining me here today. And the first thing that we're going to do on this channel is we're going to take a look at a deck tech. I put this deck together for, I don't want to call it a beginner's build, but this is definitely going to be a build that is going to be very easy to pilot and that I think you're going to have a lot of success with. I know I've had some success with it. It has won me games before. It has also done very cheeky, goofy, and weird things. But I think this is going to be a good choice for somebody that's just looking to get into EDH. This will be a good primer. This is a deck that's not very expensive, very cheap to throw together. You can put some money into it if you want to. If you don't want to, I think it will still perform well for you. But let's get into the build. We're going to be looking today at Marwyn, the Nurturer. She is the head. She is at the helm of this deck. She's 2 and a green for a legendary creature, elf druid, a 1/1. She says whenever another elf enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Marwyn, the Nurturer, and you can tap to add an amount of green mana equal to Marwyn's power. So Marwyn cares about us playing elves. She's eventually going to tap for a lot of mana. She is a good source of mana ramp for you, and one of the reasons I chose this deck personally is because if you get set up well enough, you actually don't need Marwyn out on the battlefield in order to win the game. It is nice to have her up because if you get her big enough, she can swing in for a good bit of commander damage and you can try and close the game out that way. But she's mainly just there to get you enough mana to get you set up to do the things that you want to do. And being in mono green, it's basically going to be your standard drop a lot of creatures, pump them all, swing in, beat face, and try and win that way. It's nothing fancy. I am going to go over a couple of alternate build paths with you guys to show you a couple of different directions that you can take the deck and a couple of different things that you can do with it. We are mainly going to look at 4 main categories. With this deck, we're going to be looking at mana ramp, card draw, removal, and protection. And more importantly, how are we going to win this game? Again, we're going to be in mono green, so no surprise, we're just going to be making everything huge and running over everyone, which, let's face it, it's mono green. That's a lot of fun to do. Some of the other things we're going to look at doing, we're going to talk turkey. We're going to talk about how much the deck is going to cost you to build in its current iteration in the deck list I have on Tapped Out, which I will put in the description below. We're going to talk about some alternate budget options, how you can put a little more money into this deck, how you can really take the budget extreme and go hog wild if you've got the budget to do so. And we're also going to look at some alternate build paths that you can look at as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. We're going to start off with our mana ramp category, and the very first thing we're going to include is, I mean, come on, we had to. Land of War Elves, 1 green, taps for a green. It's a good turn 1 play. Even if you wait until after Marwyn is out to get this out, it is an elf, so it will trigger Marwyn. It taps for mana. Marwyn is tapping for more mana, and you're in a good spot. We also have Elvish Mystic, which we like to call a functional reprint of Land of War Elves. It's the same thing. 1 green, elf, taps for a green. Again, if you get this out after Marwyn triggers, it will make her bigger. She will tap for more mana. You're going to quickly find that mana is not something you're going to have a problem with in this deck. We are in mono green, so if you're having a problem with mana in mono green, I'm thinking we have a problem. We're also going to be running things like Farhaven Elf, which is 2 and a green. When Farhaven Elf enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, tapped, and shuffle your library. Again, it's an elf. You're probably going to want to wait until after Marwyn's out to get this out, but he will get you that extra land. He's going to trigger Marwyn. Marwyn taps for more mana, and you are good to go. We're also running Wood Elves, which is a little better in that Wood Elves will bring that land into play untapped. It does limit you to searching for a forest. We're only running forests, so that's not that big of a deal. Again, if you play this after Marwyn is out, he will trigger Marwyn. He gets you that land. And again, you are going to just have a lot of mana at your disposal. I want to also take a couple of minutes to talk about some elf lords that we have in the deck. We're running Dwynen, Giltleaf Dayan. I probably just butchered the pronunciation of that. If somebody in the comments wants to correct me, that's fine. They're going to yell at me, no, you pronounced it all wrong. You know what? That's fine. However, she is 2 and 2 green for a legendary creature, Elf Warrior. She's a 3/4 with reach, which in this format is not irrelevant. She is a good blocker that will, take care of some things that are coming at you for a turn or two at least. She could buy you some time to get yourself set up a little better. All our other elf creatures, or other elf creatures you control, get +1/+1. Sorry. And whenever Dwayne and Guildleaf Dayan attacks, you gain 1 life for each attacking elf you control. If you are in a spot where you have 6 or 7 elves on the board, that is not irrelevant. That can gain you enough life to sort of mitigate a big swing that somebody has made at you earlier in the game and just kind of get you back in a spot where you can rebuild if you've been board wiped or, you know, that kind of thing. She's just a really good include in this deck. We're also running Elvish Archdruid, which is 1 and 2 green for a creature elf druid 2/2. Other elf creatures you control get +1/+1, and you can tap to add a green to your mana pool for each elf you control. With this guy out and even just 4 or 5 elves, again, Marwyn's tapping for a lot of mana because she's got some counters. This himself will trigger Marwyn, so she gets bigger and taps for more mana. He's going to add more mana. Again, mana is not going to be a problem for you. We also included a copy of Elvish Clan Caller, 2 green for a 1/1. Other elf creatures you control get +1/+1. She does have an activated ability that will let you search for another copy of Elvish Clan Caller. Being in a singleton format, that is never going to matter. She's just basically in here for that pump to our other elves. And finally, we're running Imperious Perfect, 2 and a green for a 2/2 creature elf warrior. Other elf creatures you control get +1/+1, and you can pay a green tap to put a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token onto the battlefield. So again, this is going to trigger Marwyn. I had to actually look to make sure that this trigger wasn't cast, but it is not cast. It just says ETB. So again, for 1 green, you can trigger Marwyn, make her a little bigger, and you are going to be good to go. Alright, so moving into our next category, we're going to look at some card draw because we want to keep our hands full. We want to have options available to us. We love drawing cards. If you don't like drawing cards, I don't really know why you're playing this game. So let's take a look at what we got. First off, we've got Shamanic Revelation, which is 3 and 2 green for a sorcery. Draw a card for each creature you control. Also has a ferocious ability, says you gain 4 life for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. Given the amount of pump effects that we have in this deck, that second ferocious ability is surprisingly relevant. This can, if your board is in a good enough state and you've got enough of those pump effects out and you've got some of your bigger creatures out on board, this can gain you a lot of life, especially if you're running low, can get you back into the swing of things and can give you a fighting shot, refill your hand. This is just a really, really good include in this deck. We've also got Collective Unconscious for 4 and 2 green, just as draw a card for each creature you control. Again, if you're in a spot where you've got even 3, 4, or 5 creatures out, especially with the amount of mana and given the number of small creatures that you can drop in a turn, this is going to refill your hand very well. If you guys look at the list and tapped out and look at the overall mana curve, you will see that the mana curves out very, very nicely. We have very few expensive cards in this deck. There are a lot of elves are very cheap to cast. So again, the curve on this runs really, really nicely, and I don't think you're going to have a problem with having a bunch of stuff in your hand that you can't cast because you just don't have the mana, because again, the curve is correct, and mana, once again, not a problem. Perhaps the sickest the sickest piece of card draw on this entire deck is Regal Force, 4 and 3 green for a 5/5 body. It is a bit expensive mana wise, but it says when he enters the battlefield, draw a card for each green creature you control. Especially if you can recur this guy or bounce him back to your hand somehow, keep recasting him. This guy is going to get you a lot of cards, especially if you've got a lot of creatures on the battlefield that have managed to stick. This guy's going to refill your hand quite nicely. Alright, so now moving on to our protection and removal package. Yes, I'm going to be that guy. I'm going to Lignify you. Lignify is 1 and a green for a tribal enchantment. Tree Folk Aura says enchant creature. Enchanted creature is a 0/4 tree folk with no abilities. This is really good to do to somebody, and I've had this done to me before. It feels super bad because this is essentially a commander killer, or not a killer, but it will shut off somebody's commander. This is something that you put on like an Animar, because Animar does not have protection from green, that will prevent somebody from using their commander to do something just completely and totally insanely stupid to combo off and just do incredibly broken, degenerate things. You can kind of slap this on somebody's commander and say, hey, at the very least, this bought me a turn or two, because now they have to try and figure out how to get rid of the Lignifier, how to get rid of their commander somehow, and then they have to recast their commander if they manage to get it back to the command zone. Really, really solid include in this deck. We're also running Alpha Authority, which is 1 in a green enchant creature. Enchanted creature has hexproof and can't be blocked by more than one creature. If you can get Marwyn big enough and give her trample somehow, which again this deck has no problem doing, you would be surprised how hard it makes Marwyn to deal with. This also pretty much shuts off all spot removal that anybody can throw at her. This is really, really solid. I hear a lot of people that talk a lot of smack about creature enchantments, that they're not very good, that they're kind of a one-off effect, and if you get rid of the creature somehow, then you've gotten rid of the enchantment, and you kind of got slowed down a little bit that way. But I think Alpha Authority is just really solid in this deck. If nothing else, it kind of shuts off spot removal for a turn or two and buys you some time to get better set up. We're also running Aspect of Mongoose, which is again 1 in a green enchant creature. Enchanted creature can't be the target of spells or abilities, and when Aspect of Mongoose is put into a graveyard from play, return Aspect of Mongoose to its owner's hand. This can get super annoying. I've had this out with this deck a number of different times, and basically the only way that somebody can get rid of it is with their Anguished Unmaking, their Utter End, their Scour from Existence, which I really highly doubt somebody's going to want to spend 7 mana and their 1 copy of Scour of Existence to get rid of your 1 and a green enchantment. But again, if Marwyn dies somehow or this goes to the graveyard, just comes right back, you recast Marwyn, slap it back on her, and you're good to go. This is a really, really good include. As far as removal goes, we're looking at things like Nature's Way, which is 1 in a green for a sorcery. Target creature you control gains vigilance and trample until end of turn. It deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. If you get Marwyn up to 7 or 8 mana, I think you'll find this is a commander killer a lot of the times. Commanders are usually even 6/6s, 7/7s if you can just get this to go off and can get Marwyn to smack into somebody's commander. Now, again, it's not going to work for things like Animar when somebody's comboed off and Animar's sitting at like a 34/34, which I've seen Animar do. This isn't going to take care of that, but again, something like a Flying Dragon or something that you can't really block and kill, if you can get Marwyn big enough, you can just kind of get rid of it that way. Really, really good include in this deck. Now, I'm also running some fog effects in this deck, simply because that is what works very well for my meta. I'm in a very creature-heavy meta that relies on combat a lot of the times to win. So you can take these fog effects out and replace them with some different removal or protection if you want to. You can look into adding more like equipment and things like that, or put in a couple of more auras. However you want to go about doing it. This is what I chose to do because this works well for my meta. I encourage you guys to kind of take a look at your meta and see what you're up against and kind of adjust accordingly. You can leave these in if you want, you can take them out, whatever you guys want to do. But we've got Winds of Calcisma, which is 1 in a green for an instant, prevent all combat damage that will be dealt this turn. Also has a ferocious ability. It says if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, instead prevent all combat damage that will be dealt this turn by creatures your opponents control. Again, that ferocious ability is going to be really easy for us to achieve. So that is going to be a really, really solid piece of protection. Protect yourself from combat damage for a turn, and then hopefully you'll get set up to where you can just win from there. Commencement of Festivities, basically the same thing, 1 in a green. It doesn't have a ferocious ability, but prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to players this turn. So basically you want to play this and not declare any blockers and then just fog everybody out. And we're also running the classic fog, just 1 green instant, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. Alright, now we're going to start looking into our removal package. We're running things like Reclamation Sage. It's a classic. 2 in a green for a creature, Elf Shaman. When it enters the battlefield, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment. I don't know of any deck that doesn't, or any green deck that doesn't run Reclamation Sage. This is just kind of an auto include. It's a 2/1. The 2/1 body's almost never going to matter. You're just playing him out to get rid of, you know, somebody's Throne of the God Pharaoh or something like that. Something that is just kind of hard to deal with. And then we've got Desert Twister. It's a little expensive at 4 and 2 green, but it's just a sorcery that says destroy target permanent. So we put this in the deck to deal with something like an Arcane Lighthouse. Shout out to my buddy Dan. I think that's the one. It's the land that makes all your opponent's creatures lose Hexproof and Shroud, or something like Dark Depths, or something like a Torpor Orb, which I've played against before. Again, shout out to my buddy Dan. Reclamation Sage won't take care of the Torpor Orb, but Desert Twister will. And now moving on to our final category, which is how are we going to win this game? Again, it shouldn't be any surprise we're in mono green stomp, so we're running things like Overrun and Overwhelming Stampede. Overrun is 2 and 3 green for a sorcery. Says creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain trample until end of turn. Overwhelming Stampede does the same thing for 3 and 2 green, except it says until end of turn creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Now, it is not uncommon in this deck to have enough mana to be able to fire both of these off in the same turn. So if you can actually get both of these out at the same time, it's going to be really hard for you not to... If you're not winning the game with both of these, you are crippling somebody to the point where they're within range that somebody else can finish them off. But more than likely, if you get both of these out, a conservative estimate is it's going to give everybody +9/+9 and trample, especially with all the other elf lords and Marwyn being as big as she's going to get. I'm willing to bet that both of these are going to close out a game. If they don't, we've also added in a copy of Vitalizing Wind, which is kind of expensive at 8 and 1 green mana, but it's instant speed and says creatures you control get +7/+7 till end of turn. A lot of times you'll play this out when it's just you and someone else. You go to declare your attack phase. Maybe they still got some blockers. They think you're only chipping in with a couple of creatures for 3 or 4 damage here and there, but all of a sudden now you've got 2 creatures that are swinging in that are getting through for now 10 power apiece, 20 power total. Somebody's game is probably going to end right there. We're also running a copy of Dragon Throne of Tarkir, which is 4 generic mana for a legendary artifact equipment. It says equipped creature has defender and 2 tap other creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is this creature's power. So it's essentially Overwhelming Stampede on an equipment. Now, the only bad part about this is in order to drop this, equip it, and use it in the same turn, it's going to cost you 9 mana total. Now, that seems like it's going to be a little steep, but given how much mana this deck pours out, it shouldn't be too hard to accomplish. And you especially don't want to play this in a turn where you can't equip it and use it in the same turn, because people are going to see it, they're going to know what it does, and you're going to have to hope that it gets back around to your side of the table so that you can use it, and that's a really risky spot to be in. If you're going to deploy this, make sure you have enough mana to get it all to go down in one shot, and then you can just win from there. And yes, because I am that guy, I have also included, now I put this in the win conditions category. I've never actually won a game with this, but this is a game ender for someone. It's Triumph of the Hordes. It's 2 and 2 green. First sorcery says until end of turn creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample and infect. Yes, I am that guy. Yes, I will play infect. And I will tell you why. Because there are times where there's going to be a player at the table that you can't deal with. Somebody is running some kind of Orzhov life gain stupidity where they've got 585 life. Well, it doesn't matter if you've got 585 life. You take 10 infect, you're dead. So, and there have been times where I have knocked out a problem player with this. It's a risky position to put yourself in, because once the table sees you infect somebody out and there's more than 1 or 2 people left, they're all going to come gunning for you because they don't know how much infect you have left in your deck. This is the only piece of infect we have in here, but your opponents don't know that, so just be forewarned. If you use this to take out the problem player, you're probably going to paint a target on yourself. Unless you can assure the table that there's going to be no more infect and this person needs to get dealt with, you can kind of politic your way out of the situation that way. I wouldn't count on being able to get that to work, but you never know. Stranger things have happened. Alright, now that we're done with all that, let's talk turkey. How much is this deck going to set you back? Going by Card Kingdom prices, which is the only source I ever use to order my EDH decks from, you guys don't have to go that route. You can use whoever you like to order your singles through. Card Kingdom, Channel Fireball, or I meant to say TCG Player, Channel Fireball, anybody like that. You guys can feel free to look at other avenues for ordering this deck. Card Kingdom lowest near mint price for the whole deck is $57.49. The 2 most expensive cards that we have are Triumph of the Hordes and Growing Rights of Itlamok. They're both in and around the $10 area. One of them is a little more than $10. I don't remember which one it is. I don't have that info handy at the moment. The cost reduction to cut those 2 cards is going to be $21. So if you're looking to save yourself a little money, Growing Rights of Itlamok is a really good include in the deck. It's just more ramp, which I almost want to say this deck doesn't need. I'm always looking for more mana ramp, and I had a copy of Growing Rights of Itlamok, so I threw it in there. Triumph of the Hordes, if you don't feel like playing Infect, or you feel like you're going to get hated out of a table too fast for playing Infect, you can certainly cut Triumph of the Hordes. It has come in handy for me a number of different times, but you can feel free to cut that as well. That will save you a little bit of money there. So now looking at some alternate build paths and upgrades. An obvious upgrade to this would be Craterhoof Behemoth, which I don't happen to have a copy of. Everybody knows what Craterhoof Behemoth does. 5 and 3 green, has haste. Whenever he enters the battlefield, creatures you control get trampling, gain +X/+X till end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. It would certainly be very easy to throw a copy of Craterhoof in this deck. Craterhoof, I think, is still sitting around $30, so when the entire deck costs you $50 to build, putting in 50% more of that with one card, to me, didn't really seem worth it. If you guys have a copy of Craterhoof Behemoth sitting around, by all means, throw it in this deck. It will perform beautifully. Another obvious upgrade would be Gaia's Cradle. I know not everybody has one sitting around, and they also don't have, the $300 plus whatever it is now to drop on one. Again, if you've got one sitting around, or if you've got money burning a hole in your pocket, by all means, put Gaia's Cradle in here. We did include Growing Rights of Itlamok, which is essentially the same thing. It's a little bit easier to remove, but not by much. So feel free to put that kind of stuff in there. Being in mono green, you don't really have a whole lot of combo potential if you like to play combo. I don't mind playing combo sometimes. It's not the way I always like to play, but if you're looking to build this as a sort of combo kind of build, there's not really a whole lot of good ways to do it. I did, in my research, come across a card called Umbral Mantle, which I don't know how I didn't hear about or didn't know about this card before I started doing this build. It's an equipment that says equipped creature has 3 untapped. This creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn and equips for 0. Essentially what this means is if there's ever a point where you can get Marwyn to tap for 3 mana, you can put this on her, use that 3 mana to untap her, give her +2/+2, and then tap her for more mana, then use 3 of that mana to untap her. And essentially you're just going to make infinite green mana. And then with infinite green mana, you can just do whatever you want. You could do something like, if you wanted to put a Helix Pinnacle in here, you could do that. Helix Pinnacle is 1 green for an enchantment that has Shroud. Pay X, put X tower counters on Helix Pinnacle. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 100 or more tower counters on Helix Pinnacle, you win the game. So I don't know if you're a fan of you win the game cards. They're kind of funny to me if you can get them to go off. Helix Pinnacle has Shrouds, so it's probably not going to be too hard for it to come back around to your upkeep unless somebody's got like a Bane of Progress or something like that. So if you wanted to throw these 2 in and go for kind of a combo finish, you could certainly do that. I have not done that. Helix Pinnacle is still a bit pricey, I think. It was sitting around $17, $18 last time I looked. But if this is a route you want to go, you could certainly build it that way. Another way to greatly increase the power level of this deck would be to put in your creature tutors. Survival of the Fittest is the obvious one here. 1 and a green for an enchantment. 1 green, discard a creature card. Search your library for a creature card, reveal that card, put it in your hand, then shuffle your library. This is basically something like you can pay a green to discard your Land of War Elves and go find your Craterhoof Behemoth or something like that. That's how that whole thing is going to play out. If you don't want to spend the money for the Survival of the Fittest, a much cheaper option is going to be Primal Command. 3 and 2 green. Choose 2, target player gains 7 life, put target non-creature permanent on top of its owner's library, target player shuffles his or her graveyard into his or her library, or search your library for a creature card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle your library. This is mainly just going to be used for that creature tutor. Having the access to the other mode is nice. You can gain 7 life if you're a little low. You can deal with somebody's non-creature permanent that's kind of causing you a problem. If you've gotten board wiped a lot, you can shuffle your graveyard back in your library and hope to draw back into some of your key pieces. But again, the main reason that we're running it is just for that creature tutor ability. Alright, now that we're done with all of that, let's look at our mana base. The mana base for this is going to be extremely straightforward. We're running 1 copy of Mosswarp Bridge, which comes into play tapped. It's a hideaway land. When it comes into play, you look at the top 4 cards of your library, exile 1 of them face down, and put the others on the bottom of your library in a random order. And then you can pay a green and tap it to play the exiled card, and you can only do that if creatures you control have total power of 10 or greater. Again, in this deck, that's not going to be that hard to do. So this was a really natural and easy include. You can hopefully tuck something like your Overrun, Overwhelming Stampede, maybe even your Triumph of the Hordes under this, and get a reduction on mana cost that way. We're also going to be running a copy of Rogue's Passage, which is a land that taps for a colorless, or you can pay 4 and tap it. Target creature can be blocked this turn. This is mainly just to get Marwyn through if you've got her big enough and hope to do a commander damage KO on somebody. And then the rest of the mana base is just 35 basic forests, and that is going to be it. So again, that is the deck, guys. If you want to read the deck list in its entirety and check it out, I will include a link to the tapped out list below. You guys can go there and take a look at the deck and see what you think. Go ahead and feel free to subscribe, smash that like button. Please feel free to leave any and all comments. I'm very new to this, so I'm open to hearing any kind of suggestions or comments or constructive criticism that you guys might have. Hopefully this will be a good resource to somebody looking to build a fairly budget and effective commander deck. And until next time, again, I am Eric. This has been the Other CEDH, and thank you very much for joining me.